You're listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
Is your pet stressed out? Does your pet need annual vaccines? Which pet is best for a child? Would you know if your dog was in pain? Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor, where you'll learn everything about keeping your pet healthy and happy. From pet care, pet meds and grooming, to pet food, pet insurance, and dental care, this is the place to find out everything there is to know about pet wellness. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets, because it's your pet. Health matters. Please welcome your Pet Doctor host, veterinary media consultant and veterinarian, Dr. Bernadine Cruz.
Summer vacation. Just the words can conjure images of exploring exotic locales, replete with warm breezes, fabulous scenery, and experiences of a lifetime. Sunny California, Florida, Hawaii, or Europe. But Newfoundland? Where is Newfoundland? Why would anyone want to go there? Newfoundland is the easternmost province of Canada. Think north, go east, and stop before you hit Greenland or Ireland. I was invited to speak at the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association's National Convention in St. John's in July. After a brief internet search of what the area had to offer, I said, sign me up. It was a decision I have not regretted. Breathtaking scenery, some of the most fascinating geology in the world. Whales, icebergs, puffins, and amazing people are just a few of the memories I brought home with me. Over the next several weeks, I'm going to share some of the adventures my travel companion, my 13-year-old granddaughter, Lauryn and I experienced. Newfoundland is intimately tied to the ocean. No portion of it is more than 62 miles, 100 kilometers from the sea. You can board tour boats out of several ports around the island. Lauryn and I floated out of Bay Bulls just south of St. John's on a catamaran owned by my guest, Michael Gatherall. Humpback whales, puffins, and lots of oohs and ahs made this excursion one of the highlights of our visit to Newfoundland. We'll be talking with Michael just after this short break.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Pet Life Radio, the #1 pet radio network on the planet, joins forces with iHeartRadio to put the power of your pets in your pocket. Awesome! Download the iHeartRadio app and rock Pet Life Radio on your phone, on your tablet, on your Xbox, in your car. Pet talk, pet tunes, and fun pet times. Pet Life Radio and iHeartRadio. Positively Possum.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Gansert, President and CEO of American Humane Association, the country's first national humane organization. Here to tell you about our new show, Be Humane, on Pet Life Radio. Each week we'll be bringing you the latest news and issues affecting our animal friends, and we'll also be bringing you interviews with Hollywood's biggest animal advocates, here to share tales about their pets and what they're doing to promote a more humane world. Our own highly experienced staff and friends of the organization will also join us each week to share what they're up to in the animal world. I hope you'll stop by. Until then, let's always remember to be humane.
Every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com. Let's talk pets on PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to the Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Michael, thank you so much for getting on the phone with us. I do appreciate it. Newfoundland is an amazing area. How did you come? Are you a Newfie by heart and lineage?
Oh, yes. Our family has been here since the early 1500s, so I guess we were among some of the first settlers, the white settlers, I should say, here to Newfoundland.
And I love your accent, and I know it's very much a Newfoundland English accent. What's your family history? Where do they come from?
Our family comes apparently from the Channel Islands, but it's quite a long ways back. However, it's a very broad mix of English and Irish predominantly here on the island. And the area that we live in Bay Bulls, just down the Avalon, is primarily Irish in this section of the community, in this area.
And it does seem as though so much of Newfoundland is so intimately tied to the ocean, where cod fishing, so many of the Portuguese sailors, the explorers, and I found it amazing that the Portuguese, and I last year was very fortunate to vacation in Spain and Portugal, and I look at the map going, how did they ever, the one time, okay, I was blown off course, but there was a constant trade going on with Newfoundland. What was so inviting to these explorers to take that risk to come to Newfoundland?
Well, I guess in those days it was monetary reasons, and that was, of course, fish. Fish was the mainstay of the diet for many of the European colonies. I guess the Catholic Church had a huge influence on that as well. You had to eat fish at least twice a week, maybe more. Oh, you didn't like it, too bad.
As I understood that it had to be white fish on Fridays because otherwise, the blood of Christ, and that's why especially the Catholic Church said cod, this nice white fish that was really pretty easy to preserve and salt.
That was in large part the reason as well. I guess the codfish lend itself to being salted and dried and had a fairly long shelf life, which enabled it to be transported back to Europe and held for throughout the winter months and the following spring until fresh supplies of salt cod arrived on their shores once again. But the Spanish and the Portuguese had quite an influence here on the island as well. Although they didn't settle here, they did play a huge role in the navigation and mapping of the area, and of course which led to the English and the French coming here, who attempted to colonize the area back in the late 1400s and early 1500s.
Your area, when I was visiting, was marvelous. The temperature, you were having a heat wave. It was in the high 20s centigrade. It was about 79 degrees, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was enjoying the heck out of it, but I felt very sorry for all of your compatriots because I think it was a little bit warm for you. Is that unusual to have those types of temperatures?
It can vary. This part of the island that we live on here is the Avalon, and that's almost an island unto itself. It's just a very narrow isthmus or small little tract of land that joins it to the mainland part of the island. So we typically get a little cooler summer here in this part of the island, whereas the central part can get a very hot summer. And in fact, for the whole month of July this year, I think we've had maybe one day where it's been less than 21 or 22 degrees centigrade, and with many days here this year up over 25. So it has been warm for us.
And did appreciate it when I got on your catamaran. So I have a feeling, being an owner of a tour company, catamaran tours that go out looking for whales and puffins, is not what your family originally did, since you are a native of Newfoundland. What was your family's background? Were they also into fishing?
Our family on both sides would have been heavily involved in the fishery up until probably the last generation. In my father's case, he did fish for quite a while, but then he worked a number of other jobs as well in construction. And my uncles, right up until they passed away, they were still very heavily involved in the fishery as well. But the last generation, there's been somewhat more of a move away from it, but still very much tied to the sea. We still have a lot of people who are actively involved in fishing, marine tourism, of course, and the other big draw to the sea right now is the oil reserves off the coast of Newfoundland.
One of the things that I noticed with your water there in Newfoundland, everywhere I went, in all the bays and harbors, it was just pristinely clean. You could see great depth. I was really surprised at the coloration when we were out on your catamaran of some of the jellyfish that were brightly colored. And it's like, really? I didn't expect that. And there were so many things I didn't expect. And your tour group, Gatherall, was fabulous because it was not just entertainment. It was educational. Where do your people get your background? Where do they get their education? Is it just being out on the water all the time?
Yeah, for a lot of our crew, and we have generally a very low turnover in our staff. The two guys in the helm, Al and Jimmy, well, Al is one of the owners as well, so Al has been here for 30 years, and Jim has worked with us for, I believe this is his 19th year. The day that you were out, the young girl who's joined us, she's a new recruit, that's Hillary, but she's caught on very quickly. But of course she's had an extensive background here on the water as well.
What I found so fascinating going out and being here, I'm in Southern California. I've gone out on some of the marine tourism boats, and if you're lucky, you might be able to see a whale going by. And I told my granddaughter, don't be surprised if we don't see anything. Oh my goodness, it was like you were throwing chum out there, and I know you weren't. There was a plethora of whales. What makes your part of Newfoundland so special to these humpback whales? And that's what we were seeing.
Yes, the humpback is probably the most common whale that we see here. But in fact, out of the 74 or so different species of whales found in the world, Newfoundland waters can be home to as many as 23 different species, ranging from the mighty blue whale all the way down to the smallest being the harbour porpoise, and quite a few varieties of whales in between. But our area is mostly populated or frequented by the humpbacks as they come through to feed on the vast schools of capelin. That's their preferred food as they come up from the southern waters down in the Caribbean, Dominican Republic area. They bring their calves up because they've got to bulk up, put on lots of weight before they head back south again. So I guess they like to go down for the all-inclusives down south, but unfortunately the food is a little lacking down there.
That's one of the things that, as we were being educated on the Gatherall catamaran, saying that the cows will mate down in the Caribbean, have a good old summertime down there, or winter, I guess I should say, and then they'll give birth. And the stats I don't remember of how much weight these calves put on, because they're nursing just like they're mammals, so they're going to be nursing from the mothers. And if you could tell us some of the stats about the fat concentration and how much weight these babies put on, it's like, oh my goodness, it was mind-boggling.
Oh, they really pack it on. The female's milk is incredibly high in its fat content, and of course it's got to build up this blubber layer for the young calf very quickly, because as it moves from the warmer waters in the southern part of the Atlantic up here to the colder northern waters, it's going from water that's maybe 22, 23 degrees centigrade up to into water that's maybe only 1 or 2 degrees centigrade at times, and especially as they carry on through. So that building up that blubber layer is vitally important for them. And that's the reason that they feed on the capelin. Of course, the capelin is very high in protein, and it helps build up the fat reserves for the mothers as they go down south. When the calf is born, they're coming in at around a ton or so. So not a small baby thing at any mark. And I mean, they're consuming huge quantities of milk a day, several hundred gallons of milk a day, and just literally packing on the weight until they get up here in the age of about 5 months, between 5 and 6 months, then they're kind of finished nursing from the mother because they're up in the food-rich waters here off the coast of Newfoundland, and then they start to gorge on the capelin as well.
And it was interesting because I looked at some of the bays and capelin had washed up, and they were fairly small fish. And going, the amount of fish that each one of these whales must ingest is just tremendous.
Oh, huge quantities of food. They'll consume, in some cases, in the larger animals, upwards of a ton of food a day and process it. So when they arrive on our shores first, they're getting pretty lean and they're pretty hungry. So usually the first week or two that they're in our areas while the capelin is just starting to move in, they're really not too interested in people or whatever else is going on around them, but more so in finding food. And typically what will happen is as the season progresses and they've been feeding and food is abundant, they can still only consume so much a day. Once they get to that stage, they relax and then they really start to get playful. And I guess the time that you arrived was certainly time to coincide with that playfulness period.
I was very surprised because, yes, there was just a large number of cows and calves. We didn't see any of them breaching. Maybe you could discuss a little bit about why they breach and some of their behaviors. But I was always concerned, I know here in Southern California, maybe we just don't have the same marine etiquette that you have in Newfoundland, but they're always so concerned with boats bothering the whales, and there the whales were coming up to your boat.
Yeah, you've got to realize, too, the geography plays a huge role in it. As these whales are coming up the eastern seaboard, once they kind of pass along by Cape Cod in some cases, and some of the humpbacks will hang around the Cape in that area, often still Wagon Bank for the summer period. But the vast majority of them continue on further north up to the coast of Newfoundland, and some will actually go all the way to Iceland and Greenland. But the vast majority of the humpbacks are going to spend their time here around the coast of Newfoundland. So once they pass up the eastern seaboard, they really haven't encountered a lot of vessel traffic, unlike certain whales and pods of whales that you would have in the Saguenay area, in the St. Lawrence River. It's one area, and of course some of the greys there around California, and particularly the orca whales over in the off Vancouver Island, where you've got whales staying in a fairly small geographic region and in close proximity to a fairly high population density, especially recreational boaters. It does become a huge problem, but we're quite lucky where we're to. And where we're based is that really that hasn't been an issue. So these whales come into our area, and there's 4 or 5 tour operators that operate here in the area, and most of us have been at it for between 25 to 30 years or so, and have grown up with the whales and realized that it's in our interest to make sure that these whales are not harassed or disturbed. Now, having said that, there's all kinds of wonderful laws and regulations that tell about how close you can approach, but somebody's forgot to tell the whales that.
Yeah, they were swimming right underneath your catamaran.
Oh, yes. They are, by nature, they are a very curious species. Now, having said that, they're still very individualistic, and each one would have its own personality. Some of these whales we find are very social. Some of them are almost exhibitionists, and others are almost completely antisocial. If they see or hear a boat coming, they may have had a bad experience at some point in the past, and you'll see them, they'll give a couple of quick flicks of their tail, and they're going to win the game of hide and seek. But most of the whales we do encounter here do tend to be very social, and sometimes really feed off the response of the people on the boat. They love to come alongside. Everybody wants to see a breach, and that's when the whales jump completely out of the water, and that is very awesome to watch. It's a spectacular display. People go to SeaWorld and these places to sit in the splash zone where Shamu and these guys splash them as they breach. This does happen in the wild, but when it happens in the wild, it's because the whales want to do it, and it's generally because they're very playful. But having said that, the most interesting thing that the whales will do, it's what we like to think is the most interesting, is what's called a spy hop, and that's when the whales are much more curious about what's going on next to them. Sometimes they'll come alongside the boat, let their body sink back in the water, give a little thrust of the tail and their flippers and pop their heads out of the water so that their eyes are above the surface and they can look in at the people moving around on the boat. And from time to time, if you get 2 or 3 whales that are very curious, they'll spend time jockeying to see which one can actually get closer to the boat.
Amazing, like little kids. Is it mostly the cows or the calves that are doing this?
It can vary in terms of, the breaching activity, lob-tailing, flippering, those sorts of things. Often it's the calves and the younger, the juvenile whales that tend to have that kind of energy level, very much like small kids with the good sugar fix going on. They get very excited and playful. Whereas the older whales, if they breach, they're going to do it once or maybe twice and that's it. But you could get a humpback calf that may breach, we've counted, in excess of 24, 25 times in succession. And you just wonder, when are they going to stop?
It's that capelin high instead of the sugar high. It's the capelin fish high.
Yeah, it could be kind of a bit like catnip going on there.
One of the things I did notice, too, was when they would spout. So when they would just spray that spew that comes from their blowhole. And my granddaughter was cute. She says, well, I think it was, they're getting rid of the water that they inhale. It's like, And they brought that up going, no, what you learned from watching the great documentary Finding Nemo, that was not exactly the truth. So what are they doing and why are they spewing? Is it water?
Well, no, it's not actually water that's ingested in the whale because, they are mammals, they're breathing mammals, and if they had water ingested in their lungs, like us, they would suffocate and drown. So when the whale actually comes to the surface, just as it starts to break the surface, it starts to exhale, and as the nostrils or the lip around the blowhole opens, the moisture that's there around that edge is carried or thrust into the air. And depending on the sea conditions and, what the whale is doing, sometimes it's a very high blow. On days when it's very calm and there's a very low swell or no wind and that sort of thing, oftentimes it's a very, very faint mist, and sometimes it's almost, very difficult to spot them even from a distance. Whereas on other days you could spot the spouts for, a mile and a half or so, plus, depending on how good your eyes are and if you know what you're looking for.
And as I understand it, that different types of whales have different number of blowholes.
Yep. Typically the toothed whales are going to have 2 blowholes. The baleen whales are going to have 2 blowholes, and the toothed whales would have typically a single blowhole. That's one of the little characteristics between them. But for this area that we operate in, it's primarily the baleen whales. And these are generally the bigger whales. The humpbacks and the fin whales are fairly commonly sighted in our region as well, down to the smaller of the baleen whales being the minke. Those are all common in our area. The toothed whales, not so much, but we do see white-sided and Atlantic white-sided and white-beaked dolphins and some harbour porpoises from time to time. And usually at least a couple of times through the season, the orca whales will make an appearance as well.
The other thing that we saw when we were taking this tour, because you're right outside of an ecological reserve, are puffins. And they were the cutest little birds, and we'll have a picture of them on our website. They somewhat look like little penguins with bright beaks, and they can kind of fly. They're not real good at it, but they can fly.
Yeah, they're kind of like a penguin in drag, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Colorful drag, yes.
They're colorful drag. They're ready for Mardi Gras. They're called the clowns of the sea, and I guess in some ways, the humpback is also known as a clown of the sea as well because of their antics. But the puffins, they almost look like a toucan that ended up in the north. But they are very, very colorful, and there's three different varieties. Here in the North Atlantic, we get the Atlantic puffin, of course. And in the northern Pacific, you get the horned puffin and the tufted puffin. The horned puffin is a little more subdued in its color, and the tufted puffin almost looks like a punk rocker. But here we're lucky enough, the area that we live in, it's an ecological reserve just off our coast, 4 islands, and there are over 2.5 million seabirds that nest here. And the reason they nest there, it's in similar fashion to the reason the whales visit. It's because there's a lot of food in this area, and that's very vital to their survival. So they come from the open ocean every summer in onto the islands where they excavate a burrow in the side of the hills. They lay a single egg per season, put a lot of care and effort into ensuring that chick and the egg survive. And, food is a huge part of that. So that's why they've selected this particular area.
So many animals eating the same food. Are people and the climate change affecting the number of birds and whales that you're seeing?
I think that's something that's always in flux. The birds, the last number of years, they typically will have good years and years where the numbers are not as great. The productivity rates are not as great. But since we've been at it here for about 30 years, generally they've had very good years overall, and it would appear that the numbers of seabirds here in the reserve in this area and have been increasing. Whales, it's a little bit different. It varies again from year to year. The humpbacks have become, increasingly common as well. They've been removed from the endangered list here in Canada and moved up or down a notch depending on how you look at it. So now they're just a species of special concern, which means that they're still at risk on some level, but not nearly so much as they were 25 or 30 years ago, or even 40 years ago. Their numbers have begun to rebound quite a bit.
Were they part of the whaling industry?
Oh, very much so. And the whaling industry did play a vital role here in the economy of Newfoundland back in the early 1800s, right through till probably about the 1940s or thereabouts. But by the time the 40s rolled around, most of the large whaling operations had ceased, and probably the last of any of the commercial whaling operations on a very small scale would have occurred maybe into the late 60s here in Newfoundland. But that would have been a very, very small scale operation. Nowadays, of course, here in Canada and Newfoundland, the whales are loved by everybody. And they are protected, so you're not permitted to hunt them, with the exception of some of the native groups that are allowed to take a small number of various species just to maintain their traditional status and their heritage.
Michael, thank you so much for getting on the line, telling us about what you're doing, how the ocean affects Newfoundland, and the wonders that are there to be seen. So hopefully people that are listening, if you're looking for a new fabulous place to take a vacation, someplace you maybe never thought of before, definitely put Newfoundland on your list. Go to Bay Bulls and take Michael Gatherall's catamaran tour, see some great whales, puffins, and just enjoy the weather. So Michael, thank you very much for being my guest today.
Oh, you're so welcome, and thank you for coming to Newfoundland for the Canadian Veterinary Association's meeting, and we're glad you managed to make it out to see us.
Wouldn't have missed it. Thank you so much. This is Dr. Bernadine Cruz on The Pet Doctor. Please listen again next week. I'll have more information on how to make you the best possible pet owner. Thanks for listening. Take care.
Pets can be a wonderful addition to your life because they're a member of the family. Keeping them healthy and happy is important. Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor with veterinary media consultant and veterinarian Dr. Bernadine Cruz. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets. The Pet Doctor, on demand every week, only on PetLifeRadio.com.